Happy Devil's Wednesday. This is the State of the Fan Address, episode 269, streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live. I screwed that one, Twitter Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with pucksandpitchforks.com editor-in-chief Nick Villano. More Devils hockey talk on this podcast on a beautiful Wednesday evening. Live, except for on Twitter or X. Do you know how I screwed that one up?
How?
Well, we talked about this last week. Now you got to pay for it, right?
Right.
And I saw there was 2-tier plans, so I picked the cheaper one. Naturally, and guess what? I picked the wrong one. So we're not streaming on that platform. I got to upgrade. And I don't think I could do it mid-flight, so maybe next week.
I just don't think we should. Personally.
It's too late now. I'm already $84 a year committed. I hope they prorate that when I upgrade to premium.
Well, anyway, I don't have much. All the things I have to say are controversial, so I'm just going to stop talking.
Actually, let's not make it controversial and say we're trying, folks. We're trying. You know, Nick and I may have a different opinion on it, but I didn't want to alienate the X fans or the Twitter fans, or that's all.
Yeah. New Jersey Devils hockey. A couple simple resignings this week. Santeri Hatakka resigned, and I of all the people they resigned, I think he's the guy that they're actually going to see. Let's go see NHL ice time. Cam Squires also signed, but he's a prospect who had a lot of upside last year. Really looked good, and I think he was in the QMJHL. I think that's where he was. But Hatakka had a really good season last year. It looked really good. You know, his first full season in New Jersey after the Timo Meier trade. And honestly, we talk a lot about what was lost to the Timo Meier trade. And, obviously Meier had a rough season for the, first 2/3 of the season. And then you're looking at Fabian Zetterlund looking pretty good. Shakir Mukhamadullin is growing as a prospect over there. But people just didn't seem to equate that Hatakka was brought in on the Meier trade. We're just looking at him as any other normal prospect, one of the drafted prospects. But that was a part of that trade that really goes underrated. You know, I think he's an NHL player now. Obviously, there's no room for him because you signed Brendan Dillon, but I'm surprised. Yeah, he's the reason why I'm not terribly concerned about Siegenthaler, and if Siegenthaler is just not as good as he once was, because I think Hatakka can be brought up. The problem is that you don't have extras. I did the math yesterday, Sam, and I'm kind of curious about your thoughts on this. The Devils have too many players. So let's say they sign Nolan Foote and Dawson Mercer. They have one too many spots. And I think I've come up with a reason why. I think I figured it out. So obviously this offseason, they surprisingly gave Curtis McDermott that 3-year deal. And then they surprisingly re-signed Nick DeSimone. And then they really surprisingly traded for Jonathan... Do you know how to say his last name? Because I'm going to mess it up.
Who are you talking about?
The guy they traded, the defenseman from Montreal.
Oh, Kosasevic or something like that?
Korsasevic, something like that. Jonathan Korsasevic. Okay, great. Those are your 3 extras. But, again, I do the math. I'm wait a minute. Bastian's coming back. You got Nolan Foote. You got Dawson Mercer, who still has to sign. You have too many players. You have right now you're on pace to have 24 players, and you have a 23-man roster. So here's what I think is going to happen, and tell me if I'm crazy. I think the reason they gave McDermott that contract, which seems insane, right? 3 years for a guy, more than the minimum. I think they gave him that contract because they're going to put him in the AHL. And they wanted to make that contract waiver proof. And what I mean by waiver proof is no one is going to claim him for 3 years, to take off on that 3-year deal and a little overspending. And what that also does is his contract doesn't count as much towards the salary cap while he's in the AHL. So it will save the Devils money towards the trade deadline if he plays in the AHL to start. And then once you do play the Rangers and you want him to go against Rempe, or you play, the Capitals, or you play one of these hard-nosed teams like the Panthers or Boston or whatever, and you do want to get him in the lineup, you call him up. And then he might go through waivers again, he might not. Now, the flaw in this is that it's not terribly fair to the player, but he's got a guaranteed $3 million basically in his pocket. Barring I don't think you would buy that contract out. I don't think you'd waste your time. But Fitzgerald doesn't tend to do that to players. I don't think that would look great to the outside. But I do think that it's an option on the table, right? Like, you have 24 players. The other option is to trade Bastian. And I think that's the one that people are going to point to pretty quickly. Or trade Foot. One of those two. You can trade Bastian or trade Foot. I don't think you're seeing any more trades for the players on the roster besides one of those two. But I feel like you would have done it by now. Maybe you do it in training camp. But here's the other poison pill of training camp is that trip to Prague. They have to get their roster solidified like 10 days before everybody else. Maybe that's exaggerating, but it's at least a week before everybody else. And I think that hurts your opportunity to facilitate a late stage trade. So, because I think Bastian and Foot would get claimed on waivers, so you would lose them for free. Maybe they don't care, But I think they do. I don't think they want to lose either of those players for free. Bastian, hasn't lived up to the contract, right? But he's he was hurt last year. He just really had a lost season. And a lot of people point to that a lot of his best efforts have come when he was paired with Michael McLeod, but that's not entirely true. Remember he had that one really good stretch on Power Play 1 where he was the net front presence? I think he could play that role for I think he could play that role if you put him with Hall and Tatar. Somewhere down the season and just try that out. I think he can really help Tatar's offensive game just by being big guy in front and cleaning up the crease. He's been really good at cleaning up in front of the crease. So I think Sheldon Keefe has a really good problem. It's not even a problem. That's not the right word. But the situation is really good to where I think, and I wrote about this yesterday, Sam. I wrote about I don't know if you read it. I wrote about I made a prediction of what the forward lines, how they were going to land for New Jersey, how the pairings were going to land, or I guess the trios were going to land. Mm-hmm. And I think I made a controversial second line. My second line, this is my prediction of what I think Sheldon Keefe is going to do. This isn't what I would personally do. So I just want to make that the caveat here. But I put Paul Cotter on the second line with Jack Hughes and Dawson Mercer. So I've given you a lot of things to react to, Sam. So I'm going to give you a second to talk because I threw a lot at you at once. Where's your head at right now?
That is not a bad line. A Cotter and Dawson Mercer with Jack Hughes. I
don't think it's terrible at all. Yeah, I think Cotter can play with stars.
Yeah, it's a matter of, what I found, especially with Jack Hughes, that his hockey IQ is so high, Jack Hughes. His skill level is elite. And some players just, you know, their style doesn't fit that style that Jack Hughes plays. Um, and I thought, well, when I think Timo Meyer and Jack Hughes played, played together sometime, maybe on the power play or whatnot. But remember when Eric Holla was on the Jack Hughes line, and everyone was like, "Oh, Holla, whatever." It's good chemistry there. To put Dawson Mercer.
2 years ago, there was good chemistry. It didn't work last year, but 2 years ago, there was definitely good chemistry.
But Cotter and Mercer, more than likely, will win the battles in the corners. And Jack Hughes' vision of the ice, I think, again, it's all about puck possession and managing the puck. I think if you have those three on a line, and whoever's on the blue line, whether it's Luke or Simon or any of these guys or Dougie, at any given moment they get open on top of the slot area, they're going to score. So I don't think it's a bad second line, and I think with the Devils, the amount of players that they have, I mean, they want to roll 4 lines. So just because it's line 2 doesn't mean it's the second best line. It doesn't mean you have to have the second best line of players on it. To me, it's all about team chemistry and how well they react and what purpose do they serve on the ice versus the other lines. So I think that's not a bad. I don't think it's not sexy where I'm like, where it's like Wayne Gretzky and Luc Robitaille and back in the day, like high-powered scores. But you want to have balance. That's how you win hockey games. You got to have balance. You got to roll 4 lines. We saw that during the playoffs. How special that third or fourth line is. The New York Rangers, Barclay Goodrow. I mean, he was tremendous. And that's called depth, folks. It's called depth. And if you want to load it up, it's called the power play. If you want to load it up. So, not bad.
Yeah. You just don't want to pay those guys what the Rangers paid Goudreau. And I think that's the worry with like a Nason, right? Is that the Rangers just made this mistake with Goudreau and they had to do some seedy actions to get Goudreau to San Jose. Circumvent his no trade clause to get him to a place he didn't want to be. So that goes back to like something that Tom Fitzgerald would never do. So it's a moot point, but you see like what a GM like Chris Drury would do when that person is no longer part of the vision, right? So I understand. Your point is correct that. And that's the same thing, like you said, with Palat. Like, he's going to show up in the playoffs, and he's going to do those things when they matter. And that's what Goudreau did last year. I'm curious about the Rangers. Just looking at that roster now, did they do anything this offseason? I can't remember.
Well, they can't get rid of Jacob Trouba because he won't allow it. I think that's the big headliner. You've got a free agency pending, I think next year with Igor Shesterkin that wants $12 to $14 million a year.
Unrestricted free agency.
Yeah,
like he can just walk to anywhere.
Yeah, and he can take any deal he wants.
Yep.
And the Rangers are trying to make moves because they know that Shesterkin really, for the most part, kept the team together, gave them a chance to win every night practically.
And then Lafreniere is up next year too, right?
Yeah. So and that's going to cost money. Now, like I said, throughout Twitter or X, that the Rangers this past this past season was literally all in or else. Right now they're going to get a second gasp at it, but they were all in, and they threw and the Florida Panthers, who were the eventual champions, had the experience, knew what it was like last season to lose in the finals, and they didn't want that feeling again, and they methodically just destroyed the Rangers. And I thought the Rangers were even lucky to get a couple wins there.
Yeah, I mean they got wildly outplayed, and would they win game 1 and 2, or did they win game 2 and 3? I can't remember.
I think it was 2 and 3.
Yeah,
it was 2 and 3 if I remember correctly.
And they got wildly outplayed in both games. Like it was the Shesterkin show, and I just don't know. I mean, you remember like that Devils series? Shesterkin was the best player on the ice of either team. Shesterkin was still the best player on the ice, except maybe in that game 7. He wasn't great in game 7 where he gave up. I don't remember if he gave up 3 with an empty netter for the 4th, but he was the biggest obstacle for the Devils. You saw the Rangers reacting to so much of what the Devils did. Trouba was a sieve. Like, he was awful in that series. And just went headhunting at one point just because he had nothing else better to do. But the Devils just outplayed them. And Shesterkin kept them in games. Except for games 1 and 2, the Rangers, like, dominated. Like, I should equate that. Like, the Devils looked lost in the first 2 games at home. They went to Madison Square Garden with nothing to lose. They got loose. And honestly, like, that's probably the best job that Lindy Ruff did in New Jersey was turning something around in game 3, whatever he said to them. And he did it again in the Carolina series where, he gave them a rousing speech of some kind. He got them to play loose again. And you remember the Devils beat Carolina, what was it, 8-4 in game 3? It looked like they could have turned that series around as well. The problem is that he stuck with Vitek Vanacek when Vanacek was clearly just not the goalie. Mm-hmm. And he just wouldn't just stick with Schmid and let the dude ride it out. And I think that, not that Schmid would have won the series, but I don't think they get stomped like they do in games 4 and 5 if he just stuck with Schmid the whole time. But that's, revisionist history is just that. It's revisionist. And, I don't know if that's necessarily, true and not true is not what we're trying to find here because it's hypothetical. What I will say is I've seen, you just think about this year for the Toronto Maple Leafs and how many times they got themselves out of holes, how many times they and yes, Austin Matthews had a historic season, but he got the most out of Austin Matthews. He got them, and maybe Austin Matthews does it under anybody. He's a one-of-a-kind talent. But I don't think William Nylander is a one-of-a-kind talent. I think he's kind of in that same talent pool as Jesper Bratt. Fantastic players. They'll be successful with anybody, but you're looking at it where I think Jesper Bratt's a 100-point player under Sheldon Keefe if he stays healthy and is in the right situations, which I think he will be because Jesper Bratt plays a decent enough two-way game that he's never going to get taken off the ice under a guy like Sheldon Keefe. He plays the quote-unquote right way. So I think the Devils are going to see Sheldon Keefe really get the best out of their players. And in these clutch situations, I've seen Keefe do great things with other teams. I was just kind of studying some of the things he did in the minors and some of the things he did in juniors, and he really did figure out the buttons to hit. And maybe it's harder to do that with $11 and $10 million players. But I look at how the Toronto Maple Leafs lost to Boston last year, I don't think it was coaching. I think Marner made a mistake in overtime. And he made the mistake to David Pastrnak. Like, they had shut Pastrnak down for most of that game, and Marner just lost the plot, and the defenseman wasn't there to back him up. It happened.
I completely agree with you. My assessment of that Game 7, as soon as Toronto scored in the third period, they got off their game. Then they got excited, and they had that one, was it 2-on-1 or 3-on-1 chance, and missed it, and then went the other way. And I think that's where the game was lost against Boston, is they got too excited because they were playing a tight-checking, airtight, defensive-first game, and then suddenly scored. Now everybody wants to score because it was so exciting, and that's what happened, in my opinion.
That's a little on Keefe. You kind of have to get your guys to turn around and focus, but that's also very hard to do mid-game, right? When the guys lose focus in the middle of the game, and I don't even a lot of people be like, well, that's a discipline issue. That I don't in Game 7, I don't think that's what we're talking about here. Yeah. Maybe in Game 43 against the Anaheim Ducks and you lose sight of the plot, sure, but I don't think Game 7 of a first-round series when you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, I think losing focus just means, like you said, you get too excited. You want to score the game-winning goal. You grip your stick really hard because you want it so bad. I truly think, I did a ranking of the most important moves the Devils have made to impact the 24-25 season. I do think Sheldon Keefe, when I look at it beyond, is the number one move that they made this offseason. I think he's going to do so much good for this franchise. Me and Vinny were actually talking about doing a series. I think he's going to do a series of the most important people in the New Jersey Devils organization. So that's going to include players, front office, coaches, AHL coaches, maybe even prospects, but we're going to look at the most important people to the success of the New Jersey Devils this season. And I don't know, I think there's an argument for Keefe to be number one. Because here's the thing. If Jacob Markstrom is good, not great, you got Jake Allen who's going to be good, or maybe even a little bit better. And then he could play in the playoffs, and you wouldn't be crazy. I still have a lot of belief in Nico Dawes. And if the Devils, if one of Markstrom or Allen gets injured, Dawes could start in the playoffs. But that's not the case for Keefe. Keefe is the coach, right? Keefe is the head coach. If you ask me, and I'm not doing the list, Vinny's doing the list, but if you ask me, it's either Keefe or Fitzgerald who are the most important people in this organization this year. Fitzgerald's done a lot of what he can do at this point. I don't know. He doesn't have a lot of money to work with. He doesn't have a lot of assets that he should move this offseason or during the season at trade deadlines and things like that. I know Seamus Casey's in the organization, and that's going to be the prime prospect that people go to target. You still got Lenny Aminaho. You got Anton Silyev, the 10th overall pick. All those pieces are going to be things that other teams covet, but I just don't think you have the money to get the superstar anyway. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to even put it out there. And you look at what Fitzgerald has done, I do think that there's a move in there. I don't think his move that he's going to make the one move is going to be more important than what Sheldon Keefe is going to do throughout the season.
Mm-hmm. Well, by the way, congratulations to Vinny on his engagement.
I know. So excited for him.
Yeah. He may be taking us up on our offer for doing a podcast during his cocktail hour.
Oh. Listen. We got to get the invites first, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. We'll talk about it. Vinny and I are going to talk later this week. But I don't know
if I'm on the A list or the B list, the C list.
I think you're on the A list.
Ooh,
I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. And, it's funny because the Let's Go Devils podcast has made itself available for weddings, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, engagement parties, corporate events. just let us know. We'll do a podcast live at your event.
I would do a wedding. I love love.
Yeah, we'll do a cocktail hour. 1 hour power hour.
I would do play-by-play for your wedding.
Really?
Get my best Doc Emmerich on.
Mm-hmm.
I'd Stan Fischler stuck in my head. I'm like, that's not who I want to say. Love Stan, but the Maven, Hall of Maven, they skipped him again this year. We hate that for him.
What do we do to get Stan in the Hockey Hall of Fame? Do I have to start calling some of these so-called professional hockey writers?
I think I have, because he made the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, and truthfully, I think that hurt his chances to get into the Hall of Fame, the Hockey Hall of Fame, because it only solidifies that he's an American writer. And although I guess Larry Brooks is an American writer, right?
Yeah,
same
with Al Morganti,
Yeah.
So I don't think that's
really.
Let me. You want some NHL conspiracy theories? I'll give you some NHLs. He must have pissed off somebody back in the day, because.
Do you think Gary's still mad?
What over that question? I honestly think Gary Bettman likes Stan Fischler. I think
too.
he was. I mean, how do you not like Stan Fischler?
But maybe he doesn't want that to be played over and over again at the Hall of Fame.
I don't know. That could be a conspiracy.
It's one of Stan Fisher's most famous moments, if not his most famous moment.
True, but I mean, his wife, his late wife, Shirley, alone could go to the Hockey Hall of Fame with her career. It was a pretty legendary career. Stan Fischler, still working, either whether he's in Israel or back in the New York City metro area. Stan Fischler, good friend of the podcast, I believe it should be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And the more I'm talking about it, the more I get pissed off that he's not. Just like, there's Patrick Elias, there's some kind of Alexander McGillney. It just the list goes on, but I'm still pissed off at what they did to Pat Burns, where he's dying of cancer, and you can get him in while he's still alive and enjoy it with his family, but you wait till he passes before. Well, you know what? Now he's in. Come on. Who are these people? They're like the cruelest people that vote on this stuff.
There was an interesting conversation this year. And a friend of the podcast, Greg Wyszynski, actually brought it up because one of the Chicklets guys got NHL votes, for awards votes. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, podcasters are getting it. It's a whole new world, I guess. And there was a kind of a negative tone towards it. And I understand it. I don't agree. I think different, you want diversity beyond just like what you normally think about diversity. You want diversity in thought and diversity in function when looking at these awards. But how many people vote for the Hall? It's like 18 or something. It's not a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you just need more people to vote.
But the Stan Fischler thing is more of a different. I think it's
like a different committee.
I think it is the Professional Hockey Writers Association, if I'm not mistaken. They nominate.
I would say that maybe they're not even thinking of him, but he's still writing. He's 93.
I don't get it. I mean, Al Morganti got in. You know, he got in. Bill Clement got in. Good friend of the podcast. In the same class. I just don't know why. Not. That's where the more this goes on, the more the conspiracy theories I have. Maybe Stan Fischler pissed off somebody because he speaks the truth. And ever since then, he just can't get in. He's a hockey encyclopedia. He practically invented it.
Right.
And it's just mind-boggling. Like, okay, well,
it's like 75 years of covering the sport. It's got to be a Guinness record.
Or is there still the good old boys club in the NHL that's blocking Stan Fischler from getting into the Hockey Hall of Fame?
Do you know what we should do?
What's that?
We should contact Guinness and apply Stan Fischler the Guinness World Record for longest career in sports reporting.
Yeah. All right. We'll get some momentum that way. And then once that happens, then you just tag at HHOF on X. Be like, hey, did you forget somebody here?
Now record holder Stan the Maven Fischler.
Or the
Guinness
people
Book of World Record holder.
Or the people in the United States will not recognize the Hockey Hall of Fame in Canada, and we'll have our own Hockey Hall of Fame in the U.S.
Well, we do have our own Hockey Hall of Fame, and Stan is in that one.
Yeah. No, that's the United States. I'm talking like our own Hockey Hall of Fame, like in general. Okay. Like, I would put Tretiak in there, McGillney.
Elias.
Yeah, Elias in there. Common sense folks, know. And plus, look, if there's a coach that's unfortunately having health issues and, and he's on his way out, I'll get him in the Hall of Fame because he's going to be there anyway, so he can enjoy it. But,
All right. We're off the rails a little bit. I do want to talk about we talked about defense last week. There's a lot of thoughts on this defense still. The hype has gone down, which I'm happy about. I wasn't loving how much hype was around this defense. This defense is good. It's not like best in the league. It's not even top 3. I think there's a lot of teams that, on paper, they're good. I think they're probably top. I want to say top 10, but I'd have to, I bet you I can name 10 teams that are at least in the conversation or above them. But when people are talking about pairings, the one that keeps coming up is Dougie Hamilton. Because, one, he's coming off that injury. I don't know what his shot's going to look like after that injury. We have to kind of see how he reacts to that big booming slap shot. But the other one is, we were pairing with Yoda Sigathar last year, and Sigathar never looked like he was good enough for the top pair. Hamilton's probably going to play 23 minutes when he comes back, right? He's fully healthy now. He was almost fully healthy the end of the season, and we're going to be 4 months removed from that. I don't know who you pair him with. Do you pair him with Dylan? You can't. I don't think you can pair him with Luke Hughes. I think that's just a disaster. Not a disaster, but it's too volatile. You don't want to play that style of game for 82 games. So you're looking at Dylan? I think it's going to be Dylan. That's what I think it's going to be.
You don't think it's going to be Pesci?
So you think Siegenthaler is going to sit?
I want him to sit. Well, that's just me. I still think that they traded the wrong guy, but Siegenthaler really doesn't have that kind of value like John Marino does on the open.
Yeah, I think that was a problem. I don't think Siegenthaler was going to bring back 2 second-round picks like Marino did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just and then the friend of the podcast, Al Blazinski, said he wants Nemitz and Hughes together. And I've always been on record. I thought they were good last year. I do. I just don't want that to be the long-term pairing. I just don't. I think Hughes should be with Pesci. I think Nemitz should be with Siegenthaler. If Siegenthaler doesn't work out, put Nemitz with Hataka. If Hataka doesn't work out for whatever reason, move Pesci to the right. Move Pesci to the left. pair him with Hamilton, put Dylan with Nemitz, put Hughes with Kostasevich, or DeSimone, whoever plays. But I think Kostasevich would be the guy. I think he's slightly better than DeSimone. DeSimone looked really good last year, but I think Kostasevich would get the first crack at it, and then you pair Luke Hughes with him. I think it's kind of a get out of my way, let Luke Hughes cook kind of a role. But I think Kostasevich would be good at just shut it down, quiet it down, right? Like make sure those 2-on-1s don't happen too often. Make sure that those turnovers aren't a big problem. Make sure you're in the right position. So I think the Devils, again, the defensive pairings is a problem, but it's a good problem to have until you figure it out. Then it's no longer a problem, I think, but you do have to figure it out because there's going to be a lot of guess and check with Sheldon Keefe that you hope he can work out in training camp and in the preseason. But again, we're talking about a truncated preseason because they go to Prague. So I think there's going to be some situations where they just deal with some broken chemistry, some things that aren't settling with that defense. I think it's going to take them like 2 months to really know what the pairings should look like, to really know what the value is up and down the lineup. I think it's going to take some time.
And there's going to be a lot of line shuffling as well because
for the first 2 months, I think you'll get to a place. Keefe tends to like his lines, but I agree. I think it's going to take a couple months, and you'll see a lot of different lines in those 2 months. Mm-hmm. Last year, and this is part of the Cotter point that I was making, Paul Cotter played on 20 different lines to start a game for Vegas. And I'll admit, I don't know if that's a lot or not a lot, like comparatively, but it feels like a lot, right?
It does.
20 different line combinations. The most he played with one line, I think, was 24 games. And that was with Carlson, William Carlson, and he left. I think he's still in Montreal, the other guy. Can't remember his name. But William Carlson was their center. Was a really good player, which is why I think he played with Jack Hughes.
Well, is that it?
I think that's it. I think we gave you over 40 minutes on a off-season podcast. Here's let's talk about the title of the podcast, Sam. What do you think is going on with the Dawson Mercer contract?
You know, it's funny because I was going to tie it into that podcast about Brady Tkachuk. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Look, he has to say that. You have to say that. You know, because, you know, when he does get traded, he doesn't want to be like part of him, be like enemy number one. You know, public enemy number one in Ottawa. Of course he has to say that.
He also doesn't want to put headlines out there that don't need to be there.
Exactly. So, you know, people that, saw that podcast, I think it was like Locked On Senators or something like that, I saw that, I laughed, and it's like, well, you know, what else is he supposed to say? Oh, I want to get traded. You know, he's not going to say that. And he doesn't want to be disrespectful to the Ottawa Senator fans. I mean, this is a business, of course. But, you know, I still believe in the rumors that, you know, there are I'm speculating that there are inquiries and just kicking around the tires, but nothing serious right now. And it's just, you know, sometimes you want to
it's probably over now. I don't think anything's happening right now.
But I think it was more of a valuation period. You know, sometimes when you want to sell your home, you want to see, okay, what are the comps? What are the other houses in the area? What are they going for? And look at their house and go to their open house and say, oh, their bathroom sucks. Ours is better. Ours can sell better. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, we did a little bit of that when we sold our house in Florida. I looked at Like I'm somebody. So when I first moved back to New Jersey, I made a major mistake on the house that I selected, and we got out of it. Like it just I was in kind of a desperation position, so we just like I picked the first house that wasn't falling apart. It turns out it was falling apart, so I got out of it.
Mind you got to explain to the audience. You were doing this during the height of COVID, if I remember correctly.
Right, it was still COVID. I was vaccinated at the time, so it was
But it was still a very very unusual time.
So here's what happened: is I moved to New Jersey first. My pregnant wife was still in Florida, and just putting some finishing touches in the house. She did not have a job here yet. I got a job that was very adamant that I had to come now. Like there was no leeway. So I was like, okay. So I came 2 months before, and I was sleeping on my friend's couch. Obviously, my pregnant wife can't sleep on me. Sleep with me on my friend's couch. So we got an Airbnb for a month, and those are expensive. So we put a lot of money into the Airbnb, and in that time, I just looked at every house that was possible. The good news is that one of my best friends is my realtor. So I could be like, we're looking at 12 houses today. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, yep. He's like, okay. Cause it's like, we're hanging out, it's not as much business as a normal Saturday for him, but I only had Saturdays to look at houses. So I'd look at 12 houses. I think we looked at definitely over 25, possibly over 30 houses. And this was through the hundreds that we looked through on Zillow. We were very picky. So I was very I took it a long look at everything. And, we ended up with a nice house.
I've been there. I've been at the Fortress.
Yeah. The price was right.
Yeah.
We bought it at a good time. We probably what probably happened was we lost a little money on the Florida house, but got it back twofold in this house. Right, if this house sold 3 months earlier, it's probably $30,000 more that they were going to get. But if we sold our house, a month earlier than we did, we'd probably get $15,000 more. So it's 6 and one, half dozen the other. It is what it is. Point being, I don't even know how we got here.
It's about valuation. Brady Kachuk,
right?
I was just making an analogy. I mean, when I went house hunting with Mrs. Wu, do you know how many bunkers we looked at?
Right.
For the podcast studio, we looked at 82 bunkers. Finally, we found one.
And I guess kind of the point is, I think the way that these trades work is they spend all year in evaluations.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Fitzgerald was on phone calls with probably 24 GMs about goalies. He probably called everybody who even had a whiff of an available goalie. And that's how we came to the right valuation for Markstrom. He knew he was going to have to overpay for Markstrom. I do think Markstrom was an overpay, but he was never that deal that happened for Ullmark was never happening for the Devils because they were still in it. And as long as the Devils were still in the goalie market, every team was going to ask for a premium. So, unfortunately, the Devils were going to end up having to pay for a premium. But he did enough research on the market to land at something that didn't hurt as bad. And you still got a premium goalie in Jacob Markstrom. I don't know if he's top 10, but he's top 13. That's how we kind of got here. Is you have to make sure when you shop for these large purchases, whether it's a superstar goalie or a house or a car, look at as many options as you can. Always get, and if you get work done on your house, always get 3 quotes. And if you ever trade for an NHL goalie, always get 3 offers.
Don't even say that. I'll talk to you off air.
What? I didn't say the C word. I'd say it once.
No. You remind me of my current job about 3 quotes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'll tell you off air. It is the dumbest thing. I know. I believe in the 3 quotes, but it's just something triggered my mind. Like, ugh.
I think it's a good place to end.
Yeah. So, well, what are you plugging?
My plugs. So I mentioned it. Read about why I think Paul Cotter should be on the second line. Read what I had for the first line. Read what I had for the third line. Read what I had for the fourth line. That's on pucksandpitchforks.com right now. Jersey Joe wrote a piece on Sheldon Keefe and some advice for the New Jersey Devils coach. We have a new piece on Anton Silyev by Sam. He just put that post up. His first post in a while, so go support Sam. Sam and his, just our last NHL draft piece, just kind of seeing what we expect out of Silyev long term. I have a piece on Alexander Holtz that I think I'm going to get in trouble with one day. But Sam, I wrote that the Devils have to call Alexander Holtz what it is, and it's just a massive failure. He was a failure of development beyond reproach. And I wrote an article about Ray Shero. What happened to Ray Shero? Why didn't he get another job? That's it.
Yeah, a couple things I'm going to plug. Go to joinourcrew.com because we're planning our trips. I got to talk to you about that November trip on that Saturday down in Tampa. Maybe we'll do it at Amalie Arena. Also, plugging October 10th, opening night. The big stage will be out at American Whiskey. Actually bumped into Frank the Tank. Not the other Frank the Tank, but Frank the Tank at American Whiskey. Saw him today and discussed, and I told you, Nick, this apparently he's got a 7 by 10 foot TV, LED display TV.
A big boy.
That's going to be featured on the big stage, so you guys can watch us. I got to figure out what we're going to do with this thing, with our speakers and this gigantic TV. Viewing parties are going to be a must with this gigantic TV. They actually hosted a viewing party, some soccer thing just recently. According to Shorts Guy, it was big, some Con America, I don't know what it was. And hundreds of people showed up on Championship Plaza. Actually, American Whiskey has the rights to the to have seating out there, and they watched a good soccer match. I think it was the finals. So, big things are happening for the podcast. I know we're in the off season, Nick, and sometimes things are a little bit slow, but we're starting to putting the finishing touches, and also Crew Brew is going to be back as well for a third and fourth and fifth runs of beer, making that, and also other good things are going to be happening in the near future. Keep it here. Go to pucksandpitchforks.com, and also the Let's Go Devils podcast, which will be dropping this podcast at midnight. Well, Nick, nice talking to you tonight. I'll tell you the stuff off air. And thank you to everybody. Mike Rosenzweig, Ted, Dubs is like, Steve Engel. We got Michael Hay in the Facebook Live. I'll fix this Twitter X thing very soon, I swear. Anyway, we're going to be out of here. Till next time, let's go Devils.